Welcome to foss-north 2020, a virtual event. I'd like to thank our sponsors and our partners. Welcome.
Morning, everyone, and let me share my slides about LibreOffice Technology. You should see them correctly now. And let me talk about this evolution of our product. So when we started, it was 12 years ago in 2010. We announced LibreOffice in the month of September. It was basically the result of a few months of activity of a group of community members, of OpenOffice community members. We saw OpenOffice under risk at the time. The company Sun had been acquired by Oracle, and Oracle had no intention on investing on OpenOffice, which was rather clear since day one. So let's look a little bit quickly at the personal productivity market. OpenOffice and LibreOffice have been there since day one. So the first product of the LibreOffice suite was Writer, was announced in the 80s and was developed in Germany. It was so successful then Marco Burris, who was a student at the time, created a company and a suite based on that first software. So before 1995, to share a document, we had to print it. There has been an evolution over the following 10 years between 95 and 2005. We moved from sharing printouts to sharing digital documents. Of course, this was helped at first by PDF. We could share the document, but we could not share an editable document. When HTML was announced, and it became clear that it was possible to have one standard format for everyone to share his own documents without worrying about the platform where the document could be read or used. So after 2005, based on the OpenOffice document format, Oasis, which is an independent consortium, developed the ODF standard. And because that standard was already quite good and was, of course, creating an issue to Microsoft because they missed a standard document format. They developed the Office OpenXML pseudo standard. That is not a standard by any means, although has been approved by ISO. The issue is that the format as approved by ISO has never been deployed by Microsoft Office. They are still using the proprietary version of that format. During those years, OpenOffice became the de facto alternative to Microsoft Office. After 2010, we announced LibreOffice, and Office OpenXML became the cornerstone of Microsoft lock-in strategy. Is at the center of that strategy. It is, of course, supported by the use of proprietary fonts and a number of behind the curtains activities that make it extremely difficult, if not impossible, to reach through interoperability. And also after 2010, several freeware Office suite entered the market, and some cloud-based Office suite grew and evolved from the different products. All the freeware Office suite are the reality is that they are Microsoft Office clones. They also clone the format, which make them weak in terms of document strategy. You should consider that Office OpenXML is the vehicle for 70 to 80% of all malware distributed with documents. So if you use those documents, they're not only weaker in terms of characteristic of the document, they can also carry viruses and malware. Looking at the market, the Office software global revenues, we are now at almost $27 billion. This is the analyst forecast for 2022. In 2025, the market will grow to over $31 billion. So it's still, although there were discussions about Office suite or productivity software disappearing, the market is still growing, and it is still growing at a 5% annual rate, as you can see from this other chart. So going back to LibreOffice, when we moved from OpenOffice to LibreOffice, we wanted to relaunch the innovations. We will see how we succeeded in doing this. At the time, we don't have the situation in 2010, but we have the situation of the OpenOffice code in 2000 and 2005. As you can see, in 5 years, the build dependencies were probably grew by a factor of 10 and made OpenOffice quite complex as a code. It was considered to be very difficult to hack. The build environment was complex, and patches were not handled in the most transparent way. The mentoring of new volunteers was compulsory, but was also an issue because there were not many mentors. So when we forked and we decided to relaunch OpenOffice under the name of LibreOffice, we had a strategy in mind. Of course, this strategy has been reoriented following the evolution of the products, but we can say that every family, which was every major family, so LibreOffice 3.x and 4, 5, 6, and 7.x, have all a focus on a specific development related topic. So it was code cleaning for the first one, of course, reducing dependencies, getting rid of deprecated libraries and code, and that was the first step. The second one was refactoring, to improve the quality of the code using more modern components. Then we looked at the user interface, cleaning the user interface, creating different options for users. And then it was the time of developing LibreOffice for different platforms. So we added mobiles, and then we added the cloud. We'll see that many of these products are available under different names because they are developed and distributed by ecosystem companies, but they share the same engine and they share the same format with LibreOffice. And with the last family, there is a very strong and focused effort on document compatibility with Microsoft Office. LibreOffice has improved quite a lot. As I said, is very difficult, but our developers managed to make important progress in that area. When we started, of course, to make it easier to hack on the LibreOffice code, the developers invented the easy hacks these were small bits of development that could be managed by a single developer, even not strongly skilled on the OpenOffice LibreOffice source code. So they try to attract new developers. They made it easier for new developers to come, and they also help to solve many small problems which would distract core developers. And there was, of course, a huge mentoring effort by core developers to mentor these new developers. As you can see from this chart, in less than 5 years, the project attracted 1,000 new developers. Of course, they're not all there. This is open source, so people in some cases come and go. But the reality is that there is still a rather steady number of new developers coming to the project, and now we have mentors to help them going through the different steps. We have a development mentor, we have a mentor who is helping other people in different areas of contributions, such as quality assurance, documentations, translations, localization, and so on. We removed a large number of unused methods. The OpenOffice code and Apache OpenOffice code is still commented in German, so we translated the useful German comments into English. The effort was basically closed with the LibreOffice 5 family. At the same time, there was a conversion of the layout using more modern layout windows and layout builders. We also changed the way the technology to build LibreOffice, and the comment of Karl Vogel in his last version of the book is that LibreOffice is now ridiculously easy to build. Refactoring as well, as you can see, the advantage of refactoring, which reflected on the robustness of LibreOffice code, is that having components which are more up-to-date reduces the number of vulnerabilities. And if you compare the vulnerabilities of Microsoft Office and the vulnerabilities of LibreOffice, you will see how this reflects into numbers. Developers and the entire project created a number of resources for development. Of course, when we started, we didn't have all of this, so we built this over the years, and today we can count on a full development related infrastructure. So we start from Gerrit for code review, and we have a policy for peer review of commits. We have Tinderboxes compiling LibreOffice on a regular basis and on different platforms. We have Jenkins for continuous integrations, and they are all the tasks are done on the different supported platforms. We have our own instance of Bugzilla for bug collecting, triaging bugs. We have a group of people that is looking at bugs and trying to solve them. We have one person who is developing testing test methods to check if there are regressions and other bugs. We use OpenGrok as a search engine for the source code. We have completely changed the online help, which is now accessible online. You can download it, users can download it locally. It's a lot more flexible and is a lot easier to develop than in the past. We have also looked at the API, so there are a couple of developers at Red Hat, mostly at Red Hat, who are maintaining the UNO and keeping it up to date. UNO is the APIs for LibreOffice is given that the product is rather complex, they are rather complex as well, and they were a little bit of a issue for new developers. So what developers have done, have developed an easier API, a thin API. You don't have, which is called LibreOffice Kit, is not as complex as UNO and allows for rendering of documents on different platforms. Then we moved to Weblate for localization. This is one of the most important characteristic of LibreOffice and is one of the largest effort in terms of a number of contributors. We have localization teams for 120 languages. We have around 20 to 25 other active projects which are preparing a native language version to ship. And today LibreOffice is available in more native language than any other application. Any other, I mean, both proprietary and open source. We cover basically almost 6 billion of people in their native language. Out of 8 billion of people, there are still languages which are either very small or quite difficult, almost lost languages in some cases, where it is difficult to find people who are knowledgeable enough to create a language version of a software. We also look at performances, of course. We have a test for performances. We do regular reports on the faults and on the crashes. We report crashes on a daily basis. These are graphics that show you the trends over 28 days versus 7 days. Of course, this helps us to keep crashes under control. If there is a spike, we are ready to jump on the topic and to try to solve the issue. Crashes are, we have automated tests on around over 50,000 documents. Most of the documents come from bug reports. They are attachment to bug reports. Then there are unit tests that are increasing in the numbers, and we also use tools for static code analysis. We use Coverity Scan, so the LibreOffice defect density was reduced from the 1.1 of OpenOffice source code to the 0.00 something of LibreOffice. We are one of the large projects with the lowest defect density. These, of course, defects are not bugs. They are issues in the source code which can trigger a bug or can create issues in terms of stability and robustness. So we can say that LibreOffice is very robust and solid in terms of source code. We also use detection tools for regressions. One of these tools people is doing binary bisect of the source code. This allows to spot the patch or the group of patches which were responsible for a specific regression by narrowing the code that has to be inspected, and this helps to avoid that regressions get into the release which is available for users. And of course, we also use fuzzing tools. One of the most known is the Google OS fuzzing, but we use also fuzzing, other fuzzing tools to spot vulnerabilities, if any. We crossing fingers, we never had a vulnerability in a release when the release was announced to users. Of course, vulnerabilities can be discovered afterwards, but we always managed to fix the vulnerability with a new version before the vulnerability was disclosed in public. So LibreOffice is rather solid. Of course, this doesn't mean that the software is perfect, but is quite strong in terms of source code base. And once we manage all this huge amount of stuff, huge amount of changes, improvement, we looked at the user interface, and just you know that the LibreOffice user interface is inherited from the OpenOffice one. It has changed quite a lot over the years. So if you look at LibreOffice today with the classic user interface with the toolbars, and you see the first version of LibreOffice. They look rather different, although the concept is the same. But we introduce a new concept with the 6 family. We introduce a concept that was inspired from the Microsoft Office approach. So the Microsoft Office introduced the ribbon user interface in around 2007. And that was evolved over the years, but basically is a user interface which changes according to the context of the document, and is based on large icons, is really focused on new users or non-technical users. So we took a different approach, but with the same objective of creating something for the users that were migrating from Microsoft Office, or from the users which were so used, for instance, to the mobile interface, to not to be at ease with the classical software interface based on toolbars. So we introduced the Notebook Bar Compact, which is a simplified version of the Notebook Bar, and the GoupedBar Compact, which is an alternative version where menus are grouped by application or by context. And after we looked at the user interface, of course, we look at compatibility. Not that we didn't look at compatibility before. Interoperability with Microsoft Office has always been an objective of the project, but of course, the more solid and robust is the source code, the deepest can be the activity on interoperability. So we increased the activity on interoperability over the last 3-4 years. And when we talk about interoperability, we talk about what we call the round-trip test. We get a Microsoft Office document, we import it into LibreOffice, we make some changes, we analyze the document, we re-export the document to Microsoft Office, and the objective is to have a document which looks exactly the same while open with LibreOffice and while reopened by Microsoft Office. If we look at Word, for instance, this is the what we look at the details we look at to create an interoperable document is we use interoperability libraries provided by Microsoft. We look at all the document details and we compare the results and we generate a result file that help into improving the filters to a level where the majority of documents are translated or are converted without any issue. Of course, you can have issues, visual issues related to the fonts used. We promote the use of open source fonts. Microsoft is promoting the use of proprietary fonts, which carry a very complex end user license agreement. So of course the approach is completely different, and sometimes you have to replace the Microsoft font with an equivalent open source font to get the same visuals appearance of the document. But what is important is that no content is lost at all in the conversion of the document. And this is our example of results. These are on the left, you have the original document, and on the right, you have the document exported by LibreOffice. Of course, these are sample documents. They are not actual documents. These are sample documents based on the challenging bits of the Microsoft Office document. For instance, all the shapes in a Microsoft Office document are not using a standard vector format, but they are using a Microsoft proprietary vector format, just for the sake of making it more difficult to reproduce the page. For macros, which are extremely frequent, especially in Excel files, of course, there is a reason for this. Microsoft is still using Visual Basic, which is a 68 old language. I was born on the same year than Basic, so 68 years ago. And using a 68 years old technology is usually a nonsense unless you want to use that technology to lock users in your products. And this is exactly what Microsoft wants to do with macros. So this is the reason why they encourage the use of macros. And we have a group of people that are really professionals on macros. They are studying it, the macros on an ongoing basis, and they have created libraries which help LibreOffice users to create macros. And LibreOffice, by the way, can create macros with Python, which is, of course, a more state-of-the-art language, and is also better maintained than Visual Basic. And these libraries have help overcome the challenges of developing macros basic on LibreOffice APIs. So if you are interested in moving a macro from Excel to LibreOffice, look at ScriptForge libraries. You can be surprised by the help you can get from these tools. Last but not least, of course, is the use of the open document format. Basically, this is the only document standard available on the market, and is the only document format which offers freedom of choice, because if you use open document format, you can really use any software which is fully compatible with ODF to create your documents and to exchange your documents with other users without having issues based on the format of the document or the content of the document. ODF has several advantages over competing formats. Is solid and robust. You can, it's not infrequent reading about users that have completely lost their content, which were on a docx file, for instance, while it's almost impossible to lose the contents which are on a ODF ODT file. And even if the file gets screwed up, the XML code, the underlying XML code is so well structured and human readable that even a non-technical user can recover the contents. ODF is consistent across operating systems. We will see it later, but basically LibreOffice has only one engine for all operating system, and therefore the documents which are created are exactly the same and not different, because for each operating system you have developed a different engine. It's truly interoperable. People that is used to use ODF knows that they can exchange their file with any other user without issue at all, apart from the fonts, which I mentioned before. But if you know which are the fonts that have been used, and the font have been properly used in the sense that they were open source font, then the issues are really close to zero. And is predictable, which means that if you save two similar documents, the ODF will be very similar as well. The structure of an ODF file is so logical, then the human mind can read it and also get the technical content from it without needing any skill to interpret numbers of exoteric command and or completely non-human readable tags, as in the case of Office OpenXML. So ODF is the best standard file format for user of personal productivity software, by far the best standard file format. And how we move from product to platform. I explained how we created a very robust source code. When we had to, over the years, when we had to develop versions for mobile and version for the cloud, it was rather easy to understand that using the same engine was the logical choice, because the engine was good enough to support deployment in different operating system and different technologies, and using the same engine would ensure users significant advantages. So in 2020, in 2010, we had just LibreOffice for the desktop, no mobile, no cloud, no other product. In 2020, we have LibreOffice for the desktop. We have a LibreOffice for the desktop with a long-term support options. We have a LibreOffice Online for the cloud, a LibreOffice Mobile for Android and iOS, and a LibreOffice for Chrome OS. We also have versions which are not different from these on Windows Store and Apple Store. So version of LibreOffice which may have a different name as they are provided by a different company, but they are based exactly on the same product, and they are using the same engine. So we decided that it was time to recognize that LibreOffice was not just a product, but a technology to develop productivity software on different platforms. So LibreOffice technology characteristics are one single engine for all modules. This engine is based on a clean and refactored source code, so we do not develop each time a new version completely from scratch. We improve, clean, and refactor the code when necessary. Last example is the evolution of the graphic engine to the Skia engine that happened over the last two major releases. And this is an example of refactoring the code with a more state-of-the-art technology. We have the same focus on code quality and consistency, and we have easy and extensive APIs. So LibreOffice, which was a single software, is now a platform for personal productivity, which is tightly integrated on desktop, mobile, and cloud. And when I say it's tightly integrated, this image will tell you it visually. So in the case of LibreOffice, we have a common productivity engine. The engine creates the same files independently from the platform. And then on each platform, you have a different UI, which is optimized for the platform, which allows you, the user, to access the productivity engine features and to create a document. So basically, if you create write a document on the desktop, on a smartphone, or on the cloud, that ODT will be exactly the same. On the contrary, proprietary and open core Office Suite, they are not, all the other freeware are not fully open source, they are open core. They have developed, they all have the same approach. They have developed a different engine for each application and for each platform. So you basically, you have a matrix for each software. You have a matrix of 9 engines, and you have a matrix of formats, because the docx created by the desktop engine is not exactly the same as the docx created by the mobile engine and by the cloud engine. And you have also a different user interface for the 3 platforms. So the approach is completely different. And of course, we see the approach of LibreOffice having huge advantages. So just to recap, software as available today, we have a desktop version from the Document Foundation, from Red Hat, and from SUSE. We have an enterprise supported desktop version from Collabora and Allotropia. All these companies belong to the LibreOffice ecosystem. We have online and cloud version from Collabora and Allotropia as well. We have an Android version from Collabora. We have an iOS and Apple Store version from Collabora, and we have a Windows Store version from Allotropia. All these are based on the same engine, share the same engine, and share the same approach. The name can be different. You will find a Collabora Online or a Collabora Office for Android. But the result is that your compatibility and your the control that you have on your documents is exactly the same. Just to summarize, LibreOffice today is the best open source Office suite, made by a strong community and a strong ecosystem. It is based on the ISO standard, or the ISO standard for interoperability and digital sovereignty. I didn't touch digital sovereignty, but of course, using an open standard is way better for digital sovereignty than using a proprietary closed standard, intentionally obfuscated, and reusing proprietary standard instead of recognized standard, starting, of course, from the Gregorian calendar, which is respected by people of other religion like Chinese and Muslim, but is not respected by Excel. And LibreOffice provides the best of free open source software with professional support available on request for enterprises. And we strongly suggest as a project, if you are an enterprise, of course, to access your optimized version for enterprise with support option instead of going for the free version, which is supported by volunteers, and it can be used, of course, but by using that version, you are not really supporting the evolution of the project, because the project needs a strong commercial ecosystem which can bring back to the project the money needed to maintain a high level of development. So thank you for listening so far. I hope it was clear enough. And I will stop sharing my screen and going back to the here to answer your questions, if any.
But now there are multiple typing here.
The cloud version, yes, the question is there any place to try the cloud version? If you install one of the several cloud open source clouds, I will mention the Nextcloud, OwnCloud, Video. They all integrate LibreOffice, so you can install the basic version. Of course, the basic version will support a limited number of concurrent users. If you need a higher number of concurrent users, you can use it, but there will be a message that remembers you that if you are using it with, let's say, a dozen concurrent users, it would be really nice and appreciated by the project if you pay for some support, because you really need support at that level, with that level of concurrent users. Of course, it's not that the software doesn't work, but it looks, if you have that number of concurrent users, it means that you are using it for some strategic document. And if you are using for some strategic document, it means that being supported, if anything happens, it's a wise decision. This is exactly the same as any other enterprise-ready open source product. If you are using an open source database, you need support, because if you have strategic data on your database, you usually want to be supported. And that's the same for LibreOffice. You need support because when you start using, putting strategic content in your documents, you need professional support. Again, as I said, the software does not stop working, but it's a question of being an educated user and a good community citizen. And of course, we provide volunteer support for everyone, but you can understand that volunteer support is not 24/7, is not all days. We are just out of Easter, and of course, during Easter there was no support. People were with their family. But why, if you have professional support, you will have support during Easter, during Christmas, the end of the year, and at any time of the year. So it's just a question of approach versus a large open source project which has a strategic importance. We have around 3 million to 4 million downloads each month. So we estimate around 200 million users worldwide. Of course, not unique users, but today unique users of software are almost disappeared. Everyone is using more than one software for the same task. Many of us use also Google Docs for some small task. Of course, I use LibreOffice for all my documents, but in some cases, to share something on a quick way, you can use another solution. But of course, LibreOffice is a strategic software for the free software community, and we think it deserves to be supported by enterprises that have decided and have made the good decision of moving to free software instead of staying with proprietary software. So I've seen that on the chat, people has posted links. You can look at that link, so you can get in touch with us. Of course, there's not a problem. We can redirect you to the right person. In any case, it's let's say that, of course, we don't provide a similar solution to Google and to Microsoft, but we cannot support the same level of infrastructure for free. Of course, that is proprietary software pays for that huge infrastructure, but at the cost of give you, the user, giving back basically all your private data to these companies. With LibreOffice, your data is your data. It's not everyone's data, and especially government's data. You can think what you know, if in a peacetime it was probably more difficult to understand the value of personal data. Today, with the war, I think we are all worried about our data going around the network without any control, because you see what happens with fake profiles created, fake news created, and I'm just talking about the surface, but data exchange for free on behind the curtains or sold. That's very worrying picture, at least for me.
Any questions? Raise your hands or start typing. Otherwise, going first, going second. So very big thanks to you, Italo. It was enjoyable as always, and thanks to everyone who attended. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.